Hello and welcome to the 6th edition of the Brand Bewitchery series as I take you through each chapter of my guidebook to help you wield the story cycle system to craft spellbinding stories for your brand. I'm Park Howell, your host here at the Business of Story, and I'm so glad you're with us today because I'm going to show you how to humanize your brand, developing its promise, gift, and personality. We will examine the emotional promise you make from your unique value proposition, the physical gift your customers receive when they buy into your offering, and we'll identify your unique personality from Carl Jung's 12 primary personality archetypes. It's all about humanizing your brand in this Chapter 6 of the Brand Bewitchery series called Mentor. You often hear me say that your brand story is not about you, it's about your customer, as you place them at the center of your story. You play the more important role of mentor or guide. It's interesting that we are in the 6th step of the story cycle system, Chapter 6, called Mentor, and this is the very first time in the process you are diving deep into the personality of your brand. Other than determining your number one position in the marketplace in Chapter 1 and doing a bit of a communication SWOT analysis on your storytelling strengths and weaknesses, everything else up to this point has been pretty much focused on your audiences, your prospects, your customers, your colleagues, and the communities you serve, as it should be. It's here in Chapter 6 that we will start merging the two worlds between your customer and you. How do you build and retain their trust to convert prospects into lifelong customers? Well, that starts now with determining how your brand personality shows up in the world, the promises you make and keep, and the gift your audiences receive from you through your offering. Again, it's not about what you make, but what you make happen. If you're going to humanize your brand, then you got to tell stories about outcomes versus offerings. An interesting point about Chapter 6 is that it is missing a client example. We initially included a story about Blue River in their Mura Experience platform, but a funny thing happened. Their refined brand story led to so much growth that the company was happily acquired by a Canadian technology firm right before we went to press on our first printing. When they found out that the Blue River Mura platform story was going to be featured in our book, well, they asked that we pull it because I guess they feared revealing their brand storytelling magic to their competition might be a problem. But here's the thing. 2 years prior to this, I interviewed Blue River's head of marketing, Sean Schroeder, and aired his episode detailing how we crafted their brand story using the story cycle system. This is the conversation that I had based my written example on for Chapter 6, so I thought you would enjoy to hear an excerpt from episode 121 called How Blue River Found the Flow in Their Brand Story. Keep listening after my reading of Chapter 6 called Mentor, How to Humanize Your Brand with Its Promise, Gift, and Personality, and you will learn how you can develop your brand personality from Sean's experience. What do you say? Let's do this thing. Chapter 6, Mentor, How to Humanize Your Brand with Its Promise, Gift, and Personality. Quote, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." Albert Einstein. Your customers buy you. I'm a fool. I took the Heroic Myth Index test in Carol S. Pearson's book, Awakening the Heroes Within. 12 archetypes to help us find ourselves and transform our world, to better understand my personality. According to Pearson, I could have been the innocent, orphan, warrior, caregiver, seeker, lover, destroyer, creator, ruler, magician, or sage. But what is the archetype personality currently prevalent in my life? Yep, the fool. also known as the jester or trickster, or with age, the wise fool. But that's a good thing. Pearson describes the fool archetype as essential for the balance of the kingdom. A king or queen wouldn't think of running their empire without the entertainment and counsel of the court jester, because these fools can speak truths, puncture sacred veils, and break rules of etiquette and decorum, quote, thereby allowing an outlet for forbidden insights, behaviors, and feelings, end quote. To me, our world is oppressively serious. Perhaps that's why the fool is prominent within me. You have the fool in you too, maybe just to a lesser degree. It is the archetype that expresses itself as a primitive, spontaneous, playful, creative. Carol Pearson says, quote, the fool is the archetype most helpful in dealing with the absurdity of the modern world and with faceless, amorphous modern bureaucracies. Places where no one takes personal responsibility. Rules are expected to be followed no matter how absurd they might be, and the tables are incredibly stacked against individual effectiveness, end quote. And it's true. I pretty much rail against all of those things. Always have. But the fool isn't the only archetype present in my life. I also score high on seeker, for curiosity, creator, industriousness, and magician, for personal power. Brand archetyping. In this chapter, I want to help you define the character archetype that reflects the authentic personality of your brand. Remember in chapter 2 called Heroes, when I may have shifted your paradigm by placing your customers at the center of your brand story rather than you? Well, now in this chapter, you will learn how to reveal your brand as your audience's mentor or guide. Think about it. Luke Skywalker would have never overthrown the evil empire without the wisdom, tools, and instruction of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda. How about Dorothy? She would have been stuck in Oz without Glinda, the good witch of the North. You play the same role in your customers' lives. You equip them with your offering and wisdom to help them on their journey to fulfill their wish. And since stories are what make us human, we use compelling character-defining archetypes, such as those in Carol Pearson's list above, to articulate and humanize your brand. Early in my career, I was taught to ask my customers insipid questions like, if your brand was a dog, what kind of dog would it be? What kind of car reflects your personality? How about a drink? Are you a cocktail, a beer, diet soda, energy drink? This accepted branding process never sat well with me. From all of our insightful exploration, we have determined that your brand is a 5-year-old green golden doodle named Hazel that drives an Audi Q3, enjoys Manhattans, reads Vogue and Outside magazines, and gives her Nordstrom personal shopper birthday presents. Seriously, man, that was nuts. This put me on a quest for a more authentic exploration, which led me to my discovery of brand archetyping. Here at last, I found a foolproof way of sculpting and authenticating a brand's distinctive, enticing personality. It's important to understand your brand personality because it informs the creative expression of your communications. How do you currently look, sound, and feel to your customers? Are you a ruler brand like American Express? A creator personality like Lego or IKEA? A regular guy-gal persona like Charles Schwab? A caregiver identity like Oprah and her own network? Or do you represent the character of the hero archetype like Patagonia? This guidebook provides you with 12 archetypes to choose from to determine the personality of your brand. But you have some introspection to do first. I'll summarize the steps here in order, and the rest of the chapter will provide the details. Number 1. Define 9 one-word descriptors for your organization, offering, and outcomes. 2. Embrace the emotional promise people experience with your brand. 3. Determine the intrinsic gift you provide in people's lives. And 4. Reveal the personality of your brand by selecting its personality archetype. 1. Finding your brand descriptors. Think of your 9 one-word brand descriptors as your brand's character traits. Defining them is the first step in determining your brand's personality archetype. This is where you start to create real meaning for your brand through the themes and stories you will tell. And you do it to make it easy for your customers to understand the character of your organization and the offering and outcomes you deliver. You may be wondering why I'm insisting these descriptors be just one word. Well, think how often you have asked someone about something they've experienced and they describe its impact on them in one word. Quote, "How'd you like the movie?" "It was touching." "What'd you think of her personality?" "She's a beautiful person." Or that time when I asked a friend about a show he saw and he replied, "Brilliant." I've had people describe my Business of Story workshops as enchanting, intriguing, and mind-blowing. Remember the seven dwarfs? Each of them has his own one-word descriptor that defines his primary archetype. Happy, sleepy, doc, bashful, sneezy, grumpy, and dopey. The point is, your mind automatically sifts out unimportant details to categorize information for easy assimilation and recall. We want to compartmentalize our knowledge about something, so we boil it down to one or two words that capture the essence of the entity or the experience. What words do people use to describe you, your brand, and your offering? What words would you like them to use? Do the OO exercise. Sidebar here, OO in the book is written as OOOH. The OO exercise, OOO, stands for Organization, Offering, and Outcomes. It helps you determine the 9 one-word descriptors that express your brand's character traits. The H underscores the exclamation point each of these words makes on your brand personality. We ultimately want to get to the one word that expresses the emotional promise of your brand, but we start by figuring out the 9. Why? Because your company, product or service, and the customer engagement methods are multifaceted. These initial 9 words are important storytelling themes that will help support your overall brand narrative. They become the essential building blocks of the true stories you will tell about the impact you make in the world. Your anecdotes will not only demonstrate your brand ethos in action, but will become the foundation for your content marketing. As you and your colleagues spot these stories in the wild, you will also begin building a storytelling culture. Remember the ROI of story from Chapter 3 and what it can mean to your organization? For example, by performing the OO exercise, we derive the following 9 one-word descriptors for the business of story. First column, organization. The 3 words are MAGE, industrious, optimistic. For offering, they're primal, dynamic, truth. And for the outcomes, clarity, connection, trust. Let's begin with the first one, MAGE, M-A-G-E. At the Business of Story, we teach the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling. I also believe that if content is king, as so many content marketers profess, then storytelling is the kingdom's sorcerer, because telling stories is where the magic truly happens. That's why I believe our people are mages of sorts, magicians, or learned people who are steeped in activating the mechanics and charisma of storytelling. Industrious. Our expertise comes from being industrious. Synonyms include diligent, hardworking, and studious, which further underscores our approach to helping people reignite their inner storyteller. But I particularly like its root meaning: skillful, clever, and ingenious. We've experienced that the use of storytelling and branding is an ingenious skill to make your brand marketing points in a brilliant way that enchants the human mind. Optimistic. As an organization, we are optimistic. While the world seems to be overwhelmed with information and interpersonally disconnected by technology and has become polarized, nationalized, and ideologicalized, we've seen how an anecdote is the antidote that brings people back together, finding common ground through a shared story. So we encourage you to tell stories on purpose. Primal. The three words that describe our offering naturally begin with primal. Homo sapiens are the only creatures we know of that think in story. We use narrative as our central organizing force, creating imagined realities that we collectively live into. That's why storytelling is not a gimmick, but has been a proven evolutionary tool since the beginning of recorded time. We are storytelling apes. Therefore, it makes sense to evolve as storytelling leaders. Dynamic. Like thermodynamics, storytelling has an energy and force all its own. Inspired by the definition of physics, story dynamics is the narrative science that studies imagination and its motion and behavior through the space and time of a story and its related entities of energy and force. Story dynamics is one of the most fundamental communication disciplines. Its main goal is to help us understand how the universe behaves through the stories we tell and live. We help you use stories to nudge the world in any direction you choose. Truth. The singular purpose of a story is to reveal a truth. From truth comes trust. Sure, you can use stories to tell untruths. Comedian Stephen Colbert even coined the term truthiness, describing something that is masquerading as genuine. But the fact is, with story, the truth eventually prevails. Clarity. The sole purpose of the three proven narrative structures of the and but therefore framework, the 5 primal elements of a story, which we will cover in Chapter 7, and the story cycle system taught by the business of story, is to evolve from an intuitive to an intentional storyteller to clarify your message. Clarity amplifies your impact because you make it easy for your audience to understand you and be open to your ask. Plus, a clear and concise story helps you simplify your journey by focusing your mission on what's truly important to your success. Connection. Storytelling is the Velcro of collaboration. As the storyteller, you start by understanding your audience's journey and empathizing with what they wish for and want. Then you share a story that they can appreciate to hook your two worlds together, creating a stronger whole. There is no more powerful uniting force between human beings than experiencing a shared story. Finally, trust. The truth about storytelling is that you use it to become confident in your authentic personal narrative and focused on your journey while gaining the trust of your audiences. Stories reveal truths that create trust. You have just reviewed the 9 one-word descriptors that are the narrative pillars for the business of story brand story strategy. In Chapter 7, you will see how these themes show up every day in our work. I'll share real-world anecdotes that reveal the truth about the impact we have on people through our storytelling offering and outcomes. But for now, let's get to work defining your brand's descriptors. To find your descriptors, make 3 columns on a whiteboard titled Organization, Offering, and Outcome. Give each of your team members 9 Post-it notes, 3 for each column, and ask them to individually write down 3 words for each of the categories. Wait until everyone is finished and then place the Post-it notes under their respective categories on the whiteboard. You will naturally group the same words together as you guide a dialogue about the 9 words you will ultimately use to describe the character traits of your brand. This discussion is invaluable to building consensus in your organization about what your brand stands for. It reveals agreements and divisions within your ranks, and the resulting exploration helps you bridge those gaps and create unity around your brand narrative. 2. Embrace your emotional promise. Inspired by your 9 brand descriptors, we move on to the second step, inching closer to revealing your brand's personality and archetype. Please find a single word that reflects the emotional promise people experience with you and your brand. This is important because while your 9 words describe the breadth of your offering, your 1-word promise takes us to the depth of your brand soul. For the business of story, our 1-word emotional promise is enchantment. Nothing in the business of story makes sense except in the light of enchantment, our singular narrative. Our goal is to enchant you with the wizardry of storytelling so that you can use its primal power to delight your customers, who in turn will experience a more captivating narrative. When we are all engrossed in these stories together, our individual and collective human potential grows. By the way, the antonyms for enchantment are repulsion, misery, and boredom. Yikes. But these negatives strengthen our promise because they represent the antagonists we are pushing against. I mean, when was the last time you were bored into buying anything? Now we have a common foe, boredom. So when you and your team select your one-word promise, review its antonyms and see those as the human emotions you are helping your customers overcome. By having your team work with you on this exercise, it will further ensure their buy-in to your entire brand narrative. They need to believe in it as strongly as you do. 3, present your gift. Okay, so you've now arrived at your one-word brand promise through your 9 one-word descriptors. Your descriptors capture the character traits of your organization, its offering, and its outcomes, all of which are built upon your unique value proposition, see Chapter 4, that artfully articulates your position statement, see Chapter 1. Let's now define what you actually make happen in the world. Your emotional brand promise is about how people feel when interacting with your brand. Your gift is what it delivers beyond your product or service. Remember earlier when I said your brand story is not about what you make, but what you make happen for your customers? This is the intrinsic gift we seek. For instance, in 1982 in Austria, Dietrich Mateschitz developed the first energy drink. His brand manifesto was and remains today, quote, "We give wings to people and ideas," unquote. Red Bull isn't just an energy drink that commands nearly 50% of the global market. It's an organization and a product that gives you wings. The drink is just the vehicle to transport you to someplace bigger. Another example I love is Booking.com. In 2013, this Amsterdam-based company connected travelers to over 425,000 hotel rooms, did $8 billion in mobile transactions, and hailed itself as, quote, planet Earth's #1 accommodation site, end quote. Today, Booking.com has more than 950,000 participating properties, including hotels, luxury resorts, bed and breakfasts, and even tree houses and igloos. They make booking your stay easy through their website, but what they make happen is captured in the campaign theme that replaces their name, Booking.com, with Booking.yeah. They captivate their audience by easily connecting them with the exhilaration of an epic adventure. Yes, Apple produces computers and other digital devices, but what they really make happen is to help you express your creativity and individuality by demonstrating how you think different. Grammatically, it should really be think differently, but that wouldn't be expressing the brand gift of thinking different, now would it? At the Business of Story, we make brand and business storytelling more accessible through our proven storytelling framework. By teaching you the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling, we are conjuring your latent storytelling superpowers to strengthen your connection with people and move them to action. Ultimately, what we make happen is to enable you to excel through the stories you tell. We enchant you internally with our promise and help you excel externally by becoming a more confident and influential communicator. So how do you unwrap your brand gift? Brainstorm with your team what your customers actually achieve when they use your product or service in their lives. Go all Maslow on this exercise and determine how your audiences find a part of their self-actualization through your offering. In gamers' terms, you declare how you, quote, level them up, end quote. Walt Disney would call it fulfilling wishes. 4. Express your authentic personality. Now let's dive into the character development so that we can create and express your brand's unique personality traits, including its attitude, appearance, tone, and feel. This is your brand archetype, the consumer-facing personality that needs to be bold and consistent from the initial contact of hello there to the wedded bliss of a fully immersive customer experience. Archetypes are universally understood characters, personalities, symbols, or patterns of behavior. All of the strong archetypes in our myths and stories take on distinct archetypes that are recognized across cultures, religions, and races, and, more to the point, target markets. Swiss psychologist Carl Jung characterized archetypes as, quote, ancient or archaic images that derive from the collective unconscious, end quote. He believed that archetypes are mythic characters imprinted on our collective psyche to help humans make sense of the characters, patterns, and fundamental motifs of our experiences as we evolved. Archetypes, therefore, evoke tremendous emotion, unique to the characters they represent. From what I have found in my travels, there appear to be 12 fundamental archetypes that pervade our stories. Some researchers suggest that there are 12 families of archetypes and 5 sub-archetypes within each family that share similar qualities. But that gets way too far into the psychic weeds for what we're accomplishing here. As you will see, your brand has a dominant personality reflected in at least one of these 12 archetypes, and it probably has supporting character traits of one or two of the other archetypes. As I mentioned, archetypes are important because they evoke emotion. Emotion creates meaning, even with inanimate objects and organizations. Creating brand meaning for your customers is your core mission. With greater meaning, you create a stronger connection. With a more resilient bond, you develop a purposeful mentorship between your brand and your customers as they venture through their journey with you. I sometimes find it difficult to convince nuts and bolts, features and benefits type people that the emotional side of archetypes is more important for their brand than the analytical side of product attributes. In fact, I usually have to prove it to them. So I ask them to consider actors like James Dean and Clint Eastwood, who most often play the characters of hero, rebel, or outlaw. Aren't these the same archetypes reflected by Harley Davidson, Greenpeace, and Apple? Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz portrayed the innocent archetype, which you might ascribe to brands like Hallmark, Charmin, and Tom's of Maine toothpaste. Adventure pilot Amelia Earhart and entrepreneur Richard Branson share characteristics of the daring explorer archetype, much like Virgin Airlines, North Face, and Red Bull. Archetypes are reflected in each of us, who in turn are reflected in the characters we are attracted to in the stories we create and consume. Therefore, when you arrive at the authentic personality archetype for your brand, your audiences sense it, feel it. There is a truth in it that transcends your brand storytelling even while it animates your narrative. You become more attractive to the customers you actually want to attract. They care about what you have to offer because you are connecting with their basal, albeit subconscious, need to connect with people they feel are like them and with organizations they can trust. This is a completely different approach to traditional features and benefits marketing. The single greatest asset of a brand is its meaning, how it resonates in the hearts and minds of its customers. Brands such as IBM, BMW, Coca-Cola, Ben & Jerry's, and Ralph Lauren nurture, manage, and defend their meaning, and they vastly outperform companies that operate with faceless bottom-line thinking. Carol Pearson and Margaret Mark reveal proven techniques for creating and managing brand meaning in their book, The Hero and the Outlaw, Building Extraordinary Brands Through the Power of Archetypes. They write, quote, archetypal psychology helps us understand the intrinsic meaning of product categories and consequently helps marketers create enduring brand identities that establish market dominance, evoke and deliver meaning to customers, and inspire customer loyalty, all potentially in socially responsible ways. End quote. Pearson and Mark outline what they consider to be the 12 primary brand archetypes and their functions shown in Table 6.1 on page 108. I've also attached a plausible brand to each archetype to demonstrate how they've matched the meaning to their offering. See if you can add another example to each archetype. Here is the table. Archetype, meaning, and brand. Archetype of creator. Creators are individualists crafting something new every day. The brand, Lowe's, Apple, Lego. Archetype, caregiver. Meaning, caregivers are the protective kind, soothing and taking care of others. Brands, Johnson & Johnson, Volvo, Campbell's Soup. Archetype, ruler. Meaning, rulers exert total control and expertise in their largely luxurious fields. Brands, Rolex, Mercedes, American Express. The jester or fool. Jesters are always good for a laugh and just want to have a good time. Brands, Ben & Jerry's, Geico, Old Spice. The regular guy gal. The regular guy gal is the everyday man or woman who is comfortable in his or her own skin. Brands like IKEA, Budweiser, and Levi. Lover. Passionate, sensuous, and unafraid to indulge in excess. Lovers give and receive love. Brands include Haagen-Dazs, Godiva, and Victoria's Secret. The hero. Fearless. Heroes show power and strength through courageous acts. Brands include Teach for America, Nike, and Army. The outlaw. In true rebellious spirit, outlaws aren't afraid to let loose and break the rules, like Harley Davidson, Urban Outfitters, and MTV. Magician. Magicians are dreamers who face the impossible and bring about a transformation. Axe, Red Bull, Disney. The innocent. The innocent evokes nostalgia, retaining or renewing faith through their pure image. Brands like Coca-Cola, Dove, and Cheerios. The explorer. Explorers are adventurous, independent, and always up for a challenge. Brands like Jeep, The North Face, and Starbucks. Finally, sage. Like a master sensei, sages possess an all-knowing sense of wisdom and understanding, like Charles Schwab, PBS, and Google. As you might imagine, many brilliant minds have written books on archetypes for branding, and my objective here is simply to introduce you to the concept and provide resources to help you define the right archetype or archetypes for your brand. There are many ways to approach an archetyping session. One of the most thorough I've found is through the workbook Archetypes in Branding, created by Margaret Pott Hartwell and Joshua C. Chen. They state, quote, "While archetypal stories have enormous impact in marketing and communications, there is also a commensurate value in observing how archetypes function within business and leadership style, and subsequently, how they affect the authenticity and trust of a brand and its outreach efforts." End quote. In both design and narrative, this is one of the most beautifully illustrative toolkits I've found that underscores the importance of and provides the tools for creating the proper archetype for your brand. So far in this chapter, you have found your 9 one-word brand descriptors. Next, you landed on the one word that defines the emotional promise you make and keep with your customers. Then you unwrap the intrinsic gift you provide, the important thing you make happen in their life. Now it's time to reveal your brand's archetype to inform how you express your promise, gift, and personality to the world. To make this exercise easier for you, simply use the archetype chart I provided. Read through the character traits of each and determine which is the best fit for your brand. Just like the OO exercise, give everyone in the room 3 Post-it notes and ask them to write down what they believe is the dominant archetype for your brand, as well as up to 2 supporting archetypes. Only write 1 archetype per Post-it. On the wall, sort archetypes by dominant and supporting, and let the conversation begin as your team shares how they arrived at their recommendations. Before you know it, you will have consensus on the most authentic personality for your brand. Revealing your archetype or archetypes is important because their character traits will inform everything you do and how you consistently express your brand's personality to the world. This includes everything from color palettes and typefaces to logo design, imagery, and tone of content, to website design and user experience, to advertising creative, sales materials and presentations, to inbound and outbound marketing strategy, to, well, you name it. Your archetypes become the face of your brand and guide how you interact with your audiences. Now, you have just taken the next step in humanizing your brand. Final thoughts. We have covered a lot of ground in brand character development. You have unearthed your 9 brand descriptors and explored the emotional promise your brand makes and keeps with its customers. You have considered the intrinsic gift it provides to reinforce the promise. And you have excavated the brand archetype or archetypes that will be the most apt reflection of its personality and its authentic meaning. Your important relationship as mentor to your customer has arrived. Can you see how your brand is being humanized? It has evolved from differentiating your features and functions in Chapter 1 to revealing its humanity here in Chapter 6. In Chapter 7, you will test the character of your brand's emerging personality by finding stories in the wild that support your one-word descriptors, promise, and gift, making your personality all the richer. And you'll explore ways to connect these stories with your customers at the right time and place on their journeys. I may be a fool, but who better to create a foolproof system to humanize your brand? Additional resources. Explore ways to express your brand's unique personality by visiting businessofstory.com/mentor to review these additional resources. Read Volume 6 of the Business of Story online magazine called Connect with Your Brand's Promise, Gift, and Personality. Listen to Margaret Mark and Carol Pearson on how to use archetypes to create deeper customer connections. Watch my quick explanation video on how to humanize your brand at bit.ly/storycycle-mentor. Story on activity. A great way to explore archetypes is to select one of your favorite actors and define what their personality is from the 12 archetypes. Then think about yourself. Which one best defines you? And what are your supporting archetypes? For further exploration, read Carol Pearson's book, Awakening the Heroes Within, 12 Archetypes to help us find ourselves and transform our world. Okay, now settle in and learn how Sean Schroeder used the Story Cycle system to develop the UVP and brand personality for Blue River and its Mura Experience platform. Let me set some context. Blue River was a Sacramento-based digital agency. They handled a ton of content creation, management, and publishing for a host of large iconic brands. Their people became so bogged down in dealing with all of this content that Blue River created an internal content management platform they called Mura to make their creators' lives easier. Well, Mura was so successful that Blue River's clients wanted to use it too. Realizing they had a tremendous business growth opportunity at hand, Sean and his fellow agency leaders commercialized their Mura platform and now found themselves running their digital agency and selling their software as a service. Great confusion arose across the board as to how to storytell about these two entities because their collective narrative was simply too complex. Are we a seasoned digital agency, a SaaS startup, or preferably both? They tried a number of branding exercises internally, and the more they worked at it, the more frustrated Sean and his team became. So they came to me, and here's what transpired as Sean tells their story about developing their brand narrative. If you want to hear the entire interview, go to episode 121 of the Business of Story podcast. I've also included the show link in the notes. company.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a ton of anxiety about how we talked about our brand, how we talked about our software, how we talked about our professional services. And, for the longest time, I really felt like we're sort of lost in the wilderness and weren't quite sure which direction to go. And after settling on the brand story that you helped us with, it really has made everything so much easier. I mean, I'd say I sleep a lot better at night.
We decided we're going to work together. You came down to Phoenix on a very, very hot Friday afternoon in June, as I recall, and you and I sat down in my conference room here, and we got together, got acquainted in person, but then we started peeling back the onion, if you will, of all the different things you guys did and what you stood for as a company and the products and services that you provide. And that's when it really almost got more confusing, maybe for both of us, before it got clear.
It was already confusing to me, so I was just sharing my confusion with you.
Sean, you want to take them through what your experience was, when we did have that conversation and where it's led to, and I'll just jump in and out of the conversation as we go. So you take the story from here.
Okay, well, I gave you that whole big brain dump of all of the things that we do and think about. And you came back to us with this idea of flow, which I was not familiar with. You explained it as this culmination of 30 years of study by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who was a professor at Claremont College down in Southern California. And this idea of flow was something that he came up with after trying to look for the source of human happiness. And when you explained to us what it was and the background for it, it instantly resonated with me because I think that's something that I've been personally always looking for ways to create flow in my life. I just didn't know that it was a word. And I certainly didn't know that I was trying to do that in my work.
Well, think about it too. Once it all started really coming together, the Mira platform was designed for you internally to find flow in your work, to get rid of the needless, senseless minutia so that you could focus on the bigger ideas and make that stuff just almost second nature, that you didn't have to think about it, that it would not be interrupting your own work process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I guess the interesting or ironic meta moment of it is that I actually experienced flow while creating Mira as I was trying to create flow for myself and our customers.
When that happens, oftentimes the best brand story DNA, the thread of your story comes literally from you and the DNA of the company. And this is where we were looking at a lot of different ways to bring these two worlds together, the digital agency and the software company. And why do you exist? What is it that you do different than anybody else? And so we always start in step one of the brand position or the position statement. And your statement reads now, Blue Interactive is the #1 resource for the most free-flowing content management experience and functional design services for medium to large business-to-business organizations. So we want to define you, make you different in that you're not just another digital firm, you're not just another software company. You bring those two worlds together for one primary reason, and that is to create flow in the lives of your customers and the lives of your employees, and even in the lives of folks like me that are working with your customers, looking in for the actual users of the of the platform. So it's about finding that continuous theme through all audiences that really ties back to what you are all about from the very beginning. And that is to find flow in your own life and now helping your customers find it in other places.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Who are your primary audiences that you're going after with your brand story?
Our primary audiences, we have 3 of them. 2 are related, and the other is kind of a strange bedfellow. We have content managers and product managers who use the Mira platform to publish content to their websites, intranets, whatever web property they have. We have B2B marketers who use the Mira Experience platform to deliver tailored, content-driven experiences, web content personalization. And then we also have developers who use the Mira platform in order to extend the functionality, to integrate third-party applications, to do all the development of any web properties that they may have.
And what do all 3 of those audiences have in common, or what do they have at stake that your product offering from a digital agency side and a software service side deliver for them or help them bridge?
In short, it's just trying to simplifying and fulfilling the promise of technology. A lot of things that we try to accomplish, whether we're developers, content managers, or marketers, is we have to use software all day long, and we have to use all these different tools. A lot of times, even though there's this promise that these tools are going to make our lives easier, they don't, and they complicate them. And so our goal, and we realize that we are one of those tools as well. And so our goal is to try and remove some of that angst of having to live in this digital life that we have to live in, and use all these tools together in order just to get our jobs done.
I think the term you're thinking about is helping free them from the malaise of their digital environments.
Yes, malaise. That was the word I was looking for.
Now your audience is understood who you're going after. You have your brand position, what you do different and better than anybody else, which then leads to that unique value proposition that brings that position together with your audiences. Blue River Interactive creates peak customer experiences by freeing your natural content flow. Now, it, to me, made so much sense when we got down to this. So Blue River Interactive, the brand, creates peak customer experiences. That's what you're ultimately about. And you talked about the experience of the Mira platform and how people loved it and it was easy to use. So really leveling them up, getting that peak experience. And then this idea of freeing your natural content flow. So you are not buried in this malaise of what you got to be doing with typical content management systems. So it frees you to be thinking about the kinds of content and how to really interact with your customers on a very human level. And hopefully then that tool, that product enables you like you're a great performer or an athlete where you're just finding that peak experience, that zone, and creating that content.
That is the goal.
That is the goal. For all of you listeners out there, if you take just a second and think about that time when you have experienced flow. And by that, again, like Sean said, it's when everything seems effortless, you lose track of time, you're just, at the top of your game, and you just feel like you're totally in flow with the universe. Things are just coming together. Now, this could be something from a sports activity you're doing. Music, Sean and his partners are all very, very good musicians. And I'm sure, Sean, you have felt the flow when you're on stage when everything is just clicking along.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I find it in many, many different places, from writing to playing music to producing music to writing code. And one of the reasons that it really resonated with me is you can find flow in many things. It's kind of one of the unique things about the human experience is that whether it's building a brick wall or, I was remodeling a bathroom several years ago and laying tile, and we did the subway tile in the bathroom. We did a lot of it, and it took a long time to do, but I was explaining to my wife, I was like, hey, I actually kind of enjoyed that process because I didn't know this at the time, but I was experiencing flow. I was just putting the mastic on the tile, putting it on the wall, getting it all perfect and everything. And there was something really gratifying about doing that.
And yet, so often in business, we don't think about bringing it into the business world because we just get so focused on what we got to do and get it out. And, we bite our nails and we eat too much and then we drink too much at night to try to get us through all that. But if we could go into work in a very mindful way and find flow in what we do, how we approach our work, and in the tools, such as the Mira platform, that helps us get there, to me, that seems like a very aspirational way for a brand to go, especially someone that, an industry you don't necessarily think flow in the digital world, in the IT world, in the content marketing world.
Well, no, and especially with, the malaise that we all experience on a daily basis and using all these different tools. And I think one of the things that really helped make it real for us was seeing a real example where people were already using the concept of flow and the principles associated with it in order to create digital experiences that people became really immersed in. And that's obviously with digital gaming. And almost every game today uses these principles of flow in order to create games and make them something that people want to play for hours and hours and hours at a time. And
so now you're doing that with your brand story. We get into the brand promise part of your story, and your brand promise comes down to one word. And we always look to do that. If you're out there trying to do your own brand story, folks, think about one word that would describe the emotion or what would trigger an emotion that you would want to have happen around your brand. And that's whether it's in every brand touch point, whether they're calling in, whether they're hitting your website, or they're using your product. And Blue River's brand promise that plays off of the flow is simply the word freedom. giving you the freedom to do your best work. How's that playing out now within your company? And I know you guys are just starting to enact that internally, but how does that brand promise play into what you do and how you're approaching business?
To be honest, it's filtering through every single aspect of our business. In pitching my business partners on the idea of adopting this as our brand story, I did a fair amount of research and really looked at ways that we can infuse this into every single thing that we do, and it does. I took their 8 principles of flow that Cheek sent me. I identified that not all of them have to be present, but some of them do, and some of them are present when people find themselves experiencing flow. And so I created a subset of those down these five principles and looked how we might apply them across our business to not just our customers, but to how we design applications, including Mira. We often do custom development projects for some of our larger clients. So we do that within our software, within the software that we build. Look at how we can create flow within our employees' lives. What does that mean for us culturally? And there's a really interesting thing that I found in my research. There was a Cynthia Maxwell, I believe is her name, she's the director of IT at Slack, actually uses flow in order to measure job performance. And so I did some more research on that and how we might use these 5 principles of flow in order to help create flow for our employees and help create more meaning in their work at Blue River.
And what were the 5 principles now that you were basing, your brand story helped inspire, but you're now basing operational excellence off of?
So those 5 would be clear goals, meaning everything you do, you know exactly where you're supposed to be doing and where you're supposed to be going. Providing clear and timely feedback. So as you're trying to accomplish these goals, you're getting feedback that you are either going in the right direction or the wrong direction, or you may need to adjust. Making sure that there's a balance between the challenge and the skill level. When the challenge gets too high, it creates a lot of anxiety for people, and they tend to not complete the task as often and tend to check out. Same thing goes where if it's not challenging enough, we find that people become really bored and they also check out at that point. So what we try to do is create that sweet spot in between by creating that balance between the challenge and the skill. And then other things like eliminating distraction and reducing worry of failure.
And how do these play into then as you're actually designing and perfecting and iterating on the Mira platform?
It's interesting. It does have some applications within, say, from a UX perspective. So when we look at creating the interface for the Mira platform, someone ultimately they're going in to accomplish a task to create content, to get it published, to do something within the system that there's some particular outcome for. So making sure that when they do go to accomplish a task, that there are clear goals and that they know that they're getting feedback from the system along the way that what they're trying to do, they are actually accomplished, so that motivates them to keep going. And of course, balancing the challenge between having balance between the challenge and the skill is an interesting thing from a US perspective, because you don't want to make any piece of software challenging, right? But we also don't want to make it so that there are too many steps in the way of you getting something done. So when we talk about it in that context of software development and UX, it sounds kind of weird to say, hey, we want to make it slightly challenged, but I don't really look at it as adding challenge so much as shortening up steps in order to accomplish something sooner. And I think that helps, create that balance there. Eliminating distractions. So when we're looking at, the elements in the user interface, what things can we take away? How can we design things so that there's a specific hierarchy so that it's not as distracting, so people can focus on the task at hand? And then, of course, reducing worry of failure, providing ways to recover when you do make a mistake. Having something as simple as a trash bin for your content, when you go delete it out of the system, it's still there, but we know that just because you delete it, you can recover it. It's not gone forever. So simple things like that can be applied, and you combine them all together, and that's how we endeavor to create flow.
And when you really get a solid brand story together is when it starts inspiring this kind of action, this kind of introspection, if you will, of your operating procedures, of everything from the kinds of employees you want to hire to the type of environment and atmosphere that you want to provide to them so that they, all these things work for them there. You've got clear goals for them, clear and timely feedback. You're balancing that challenge between the challenge and skill levels so that they feel leveled up every day they're there. They're challenged. They know that they're doing good work. You're eliminating the distractions so they can find their flow throughout the day and taking away that fear of failure. Like, no, don't worry about it. In fact, if you're failing means you're trying, so let's keep moving ahead. And who wouldn't want that kind of environment? And I believe anyways, when you have that kind of environment, then it's going to absolutely express itself through the products and services that you provide to your audience, your customers, so that your own brand story starts getting magnified, amplified, not only within your own company, but then in the products and services you provide and how those services engage and interact with your clients and their customers. So it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you've got the right story that is true and authentic to what you're about, where you started from day one, that you really can't lose. It's a matter of just staying now focused and being very clear on that story as you pull it together, as you craft it, as you tell it, and invite other people into it.
Yeah, and to me, that was the key to the whole thing. It was, for something to have legs like that, it has to be authentic and true. Otherwise, you have to feel like you're making stuff up in order to fill the promise that that you're making. And that was our challenge before. Is like we didn't really know that that's what we're trying to do, and therefore we're like, well, we're trying to make things easy. We're trying to create great customer experiences. We're trying to do these different things, and it's like, yeah, that's true. We are trying to do all those things. However, we didn't have that North Star that really allowed us to, kind of take off the shackles of having too much to think about. There's people have talked about in the past about how simplifying thing actually provides a lot of freedom. And it's true. It does. I mean, having to not have to think about everything and really focus on the thing that we knew to be authentic and true, provided us with our own flow. It granted us a ton of freedom in how we think about ourselves. And really, everything else just became so much easier.
Yeah. Well, it did eventually, because you said that, let's tell the story about when you originally presented this to your partners and kind of the pushback you got on that, because I think it's a really interesting look at all of us. When greeted with something new, we kind of like status quo. We don't get it immediately, and then how it starts coming together. But flow wasn't immediately adopted by your gang.
No, and I tried to prepare you for that, Park.
Yes, you did. You did.
My business partners are a very pragmatic group, and they have a very, I guess, their BS detectors are always on, and they have an aversion to marketing speak and marketing in general. So my challenge was pretty big. And when you start throwing words around like storytelling and things like that, they, kind of roll their eyes, they check out, and they're like, oh, whatever. This is can we just talk about things that are real? And so that was the big challenge. When Park brought this to me, I thought Park did a great job of laying the groundwork for it. But even then I was like, man, I don't know if these guys are going to get it. And so I had Park present it to them with me in the room. Park was remote, and Park couldn't see their reactions and couldn't hear their feedback, and it was it was tough. I mean, they were underwhelmed from the beginning, and they felt like even using the word flow was too punny, because it flowed too well with the Blue River, the name, and in that regard, it almost is a disservice because they didn't take it seriously. And so I had to go back and do a ton of research. And I was like, no, I got this. This makes total sense to me. I understand exactly what Park is talking about here. And so I went and listened to the audiobook of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I listened to his book about flow. And the whole time that I was listening to it, I would go on a run, creating flow again by running and doing these things that help, provide deep focus. And while I was listening to the book, he would talk about different things, and I would have to stop and take notes, because so many things that he was talking about, I could instantly see a way to apply them to our business. And so I went back, did a bunch of research, eventually came back with a slide deck of, 109 slides that broke down the whole thing, going back with all the way back to why I started the business, our business, or building the software part of our business way back in 2001, and everything that led up to, why flow makes sense and all the different angles that we could take with it. Bringing in Cynthia Maxwell from Slack and her perspective, talking about the game design, and then looking at all the different ways that we could apply it in UX and even for our developers that use the Mira platform. One of the things that we're always trying to do is create frameworks and things for them to use to help them find flow. So if they're a programmer and they're developing something in Object or in JavaScript or Java or anything else, that we don't want to have them focus on having to deal with the UI of the tool. So we're always looking to provide frameworks, things to make their job easier. And once I went back and explained it all to them and showed them how it slotted into every single thing we did, suddenly they were on board.
Well, and you did something else that I think was really, really smart from a guy who's trying to get, a brand story into the group. And that is when you went and interviewed your employees, and they had no idea what you were talking about. They had no idea about flow. But what was the question you asked them? Because that was the feedback that you gave your own partners and said, look, we're already doing this.
Yeah, well, that was me, being sort of white knuckling it about doing this presentation. I was worried. I was like, okay, even if I go through and show this great case for why this makes sense for our business, if our employees aren't on board, if they don't understand this, then my business partners aren't going to understand it, and they're going to shoot it down because they're going to say, like, no one's going to get this. So we use Slack in our business, and so I asked most of our employees, I think all but maybe one or two, I asked them, have you ever experienced what people might call a state of flow or being in the zone? And if so, how would you describe it? And the results that I got back were crazy. Every single person, and I got to say, I did start out, with some software. I picked the people that I knew would probably most likely find it. We have a ton of crazy creative people in our business. So I started with people. There's a guy that does kinetic sculpture in our business. And I knew if I asked him, he'd know exactly what I was talking about. And he came back and said, oh yeah, I know exactly what that means. There are times when I don't eat for 10 to 12 hours because I am so immersed in what I'm doing with my art that I lose track of time. And, everything just kind of goes by the wayside because I'm just so immersed in it. We have someone who has done stand-up comedy before and also does painting. I asked him, same thing. He came back and with a great response to it. And he, said, talked about the different ways beyond those two things, how he's also experienced it. And that was the story with every single one. I was blown away by how it resonated with all our employees. And people would go from writing a paragraph to literally writing an essay about it, completely unprompted. I just asked a simple question. And then I would follow up with, okay, so now that I understand that you know what this is, what are some things that you do to help get you into flow? So we wanted to look at what are the triggers that we can use, because I'm going to use those as part of, recommendations for our employees and say, hey, these are all the things that you guys shared with me about how you get into the flow. So let's share all this information and let's help each other get into flow through our policies, through our HR policies, and through suggestions and just team sharing. It was really fascinating.
And when you shared those stories with your partners, what were their take?
Well, there wasn't really much for them to say at that point. They were just kind of dumbfounded, like, wow, this is much bigger than they had anticipated. Like myself, I was surprised at how much bigger than it was. So, it really helped them understand that what we were talking about was not just marketing speak. It wasn't just big fluffy ideas, but it had legs. It was true. It was authentic, and it was something that we could do starting tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think you had one of your partners even say, well, why flow? Why not just say easy? Which I thought was funny.
Yeah, so that was actually our UX director, and he's always trying to simplify everything, which I appreciate. And so his way of doing that was saying, why instead of just saying flow, why not just say it's easy? And so I had to go through the thing and say, like, easy is not a brand platform. Easy is just a result of what we do. And so I want to be very, very deliberate in how we approach this problem. And that's why flow matters. And that's why, we're sort of hanging our hat on it, because it does matter to us as a business. And it gives us a very deliberate way of implementing our brand story in a way that's very, very real.
Well, and we had to move them too from thinking of flow as being a tongue-in-cheek thing that went along with the Blue River name,
exactly.
Into no, flow is actually a thing. Flow is actually something that you can measure and something that is worth aspiring to, because when we all find our flow, and we've all experienced in one way, shape, or form, but if we can find it in our business, in our vendor, a la partner with Blue River, or help our clients and customers find it, then we're way ahead of the game. So the brand gift, well, the brand promise is freedom. We're going to free you from the malaise of the digital environments, or that digital detritus, which I still love that term. I got to get a T-shirt with digital detritus on it, Sean. But to free you, the brand gift, and this is just answering the question, is your story is not about what you make, but what you make happen. So what is it that you make happen in your customer's life? And in this case with Blue River, the brand gift is helping you find your flow. Simply finding your flow, whether you are a partner, whether you are an employee, whether you are a client customer, or you're helping your clients and customers help their customers get it. It's all about the gift you bring to the party is finding your flow. So that becomes the big inspiration for what you do physically to help the world out there.
Yeah, and you know what I love most about it, Park, is that through the study of flow that Csikszentmihalyi did, he found that people, when you do find an activity that's meaningful like that, it goes beyond the work that you're doing. And not only does the activity become an end in itself, as he says, but it actually cascades out to other aspects of your life. So to me, it was very, very profound in that I immediately found a way to start applying that to, my life at home, how, my kids watch TV, whether it's, we look at it as a passive activity or an active activity. And there's an example that Csikszentmihalyi gives in his book about active versus passive, TV viewing. So there's that. There's applying these principles to flow. I coach a lot of youth sports because I have kids and they play sports, and that's something we enjoy doing. But as a coach, I'm looking at how can I apply these things, to the athletes that I coach. And so it really is. It animates my life in so many different ways now.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing about a really focused and authentic brand stories. It reaches well beyond the office and well beyond the product and service. It does impact everybody that comes in contact with the brand, family, friends, foes, you name it. A good brand story is going to do that for you. So we then move into, in the enter the mentor stages. Now it's like, how do you express this? What is the character? What is the consistent, authentic character, look and feel that Blue River is going to go to market with? And it's probably what you already have, but it might be fine-tuned and focused even more. And you selected 3 brand archetype personalities, and we take you through this process where we look at 12 Jungian archetypes to start getting our heads around the personality of the brand. You selected 1, the creator brand personality, as your ultimate archetype, but it's also supported by the regular guy, gal, what you see is what you get archetype. There's no BS when people come to see you. And also the sage, which I like too, because the sage is like, we spent a lot of time working on this and we understand what you are going through because we built this platform initially for us. So we knew when it was working right and now have put it out to the world. You've given us your feedback and we keep iterating on it. So you've got the sage with the regular guy, gal supporting this overall creator archetype. Now, I imagine you are in the throes of thinking about how are you going to redesign your website and work through your sales and marketing and your customer engagement from that creator mindset.
Yeah, well, that's really at the heart of everything we do because we're constantly trying to solve problems. And I think that's one of the pieces or parts of the thread of our stories of business because, looking through our business, we have all kinds of creative people. And for the longest time, I was trying to figure out, what is that thread between developers, between project managers, between designers? There's something going on here. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it for the longest time, but I've been thinking about it for years. When we would go to developer conferences, I'd end up meeting musicians. When I go to marketing conferences, I'd meet, other musicians and people that do other creative endeavors. And it can't seem to get away from it. And so I think by virtue of the type of work that we do and that it does, at its heart does require that sort of elimination of distraction and high level of focus that you end up finding flow seekers. And I think that really is kind of the big thing. So really highlighting that aspect of our business that, we really are creative, by nature. And that's why we started doing what we did in the first place. And that's why Simon Sinek, and he talks about you want to do business with people who believe what you believe. This is similar to that in that, we work with people who believe what we believe in that regard. And so that's another way that it sort of gets articulated, that creative side of things.
Yeah. And it comes out of this exercise that we did with you too, where you're looking for the 9 brand descriptors. This goes back to that one word that kind of describes, or very much describes, what the company's about. We end up with 9 of them. And Sean, we've just done this for so many years that for some reason, 9 seemed to be the magical number that people would arrive at. And I can break it down into 3 buckets. So you've got a bucket about, give me 3 descriptors that truly describe the heart of the company. Then give me 3 descriptors that talk, to the heart of the product or service offering. And then give me 3 descriptors that talk about customer engagement. What does this all mean? The make happen. And so your company descriptors came down to authentic, empathetic, and dedicated. So authentic, what you see is what you get, with us. No BS, the regular guy, gal personality. But empathetic, that we've been to where you have been, customer and client. We know the malaise, the digital detritus that you have to deal with. And so we are trying to help you out of that. And then dedicated. That's what we do. That's why we show up every single day to help make your life easier, to find flow. Then you moved into your product descriptors. And yeah, I love these because the product is determined. So it's kind of hard, like, how can a product be determined? Well, the people behind it certainly are, but you are constantly iterating and updating your product. And I've just seen in some of the chat groups online of the great reviews that you get from your users of talking about how dedicated you are to keep dialing it in and getting it better. It's empowering. So it frees them again to do their flow. It empowers them to be better at what they do in content management, creation, developing, whatever. And it's meaningful. It's just not another tool that's floating across your desktop that you got to deal with. It actually brings meaning. It's really meaning-filled and meaningful for your day and in your work. And then finally, that customer engagement about being mindful, inspiring, and harmonious. And I love this concept of mindfulness, of bringing mindfulness back to the desk and saying, look, we are not going to get in your way. We're not going to give you a platform that gets in your way. In fact, it's going to do the exact opposite. It's going to free you up so you can be mindful about your task at hand without the interruptions, which is inspiring and looking for that harmony throughout everything. So I thought the way those brand descriptors came together was great. The other thing I would point out to the listeners, when you're doing this, your brand descriptors, if you write them down, are typically, right out of the box, very operational, very jargony, and I guarantee you're going to have innovation in there. Everybody puts innovation in because everybody wants to think about being innovative. Well, I want you to dig deeper, as Sean and his team did, to find these kinds of brand descriptors that really get to the heart and the humanity of your brand. Not just what you make, but what you make happen in people's lives. And that leads us to number 9, the moral of the story, or the brand purpose. And I just love how this all comes together, because this really becomes the North Star for Sean and his team. And brand purpose is this: Blue River Interactive helps people find their flow to simplify and enrich their lives. Now, who can't live into that? So help people find their flow to simplify and enrich their lives. Everything from Sean and his family, to his partners and their family, to their employees and their family, to their clients, customers, and their clients and customers. It's always about being focused on what you make happen in people's lives. Don't worry about the product or service. You are selling that, but you're selling it for a bigger reason. To help them find flow and simplify and enrich their lives. When you focus on delivering that to your clients, customers, and all your audiences, the money's going to find you, and it's going to find you in droves. So how is that sitting with everybody there so far, Sean?
So far, so good, though. Everyone that I've talked to and everyone that I've shared it with instantly gets it. And it's great to watch them, sort of emotionally embrace this idea. It's really, like I talk about how it's animated other aspects of my life, but it really has animated the employees that I've shared it with in terms of how they view our business and how they see themselves moving forward in our business.
All right, Sean, any last words for our listeners when it comes down to doing this, the 10-step story cycle process to get you through this craziness of finding your story?
I would say don't let yourself get overwhelmed when you start going through, if you download Park's workbook. We had, our story is a little bit complicated. It's probably easier for most people. But if you are feeling overwhelmed, just trust the process. I'm a Dodgers fan, and one thing that Dave Roberts, the general manager, likes to say is you got to trust the process. So I would say the same thing here: trust the process, and don't feel like you have to get it right. You don't have to get it perfect, and that, because that's kind of the point, right? Is the fact that you're going through this process means that you don't have it perfect. So just accept that, get it all out there, and hopefully you will find some clarity by doing that.
Yeah, you're right. It's very much of an iterative process. You get into it, and those that do download the workbook and work through it, and then I work with them sometimes just on phone calls to get them through it, or, in your case, it's a much deeper engagement, that a lot of times I'll get a book that's half done, 3/4 of the way done, because they just simply don't have the answers for everything, and that's all right. That's where I come in. I play part anthropologist, part psychologist. I think you even gave me the name branthropologist, maybe something like that. I liked it. I looked it up. Somebody's already got that, so I can't have it. But it's like, man, you got to dig through this stuff. You got to dig deep and think about it. And Sean did ask me one day when I came up with this, I told him what I thought about the flow concept. He goes, "Oh my God, was this like a lightning strike that came out of nowhere, an epiphany?" And I had to be honest with him. I said, actually, it was sort of a duh. Well, I mean, it was sitting right in front of my face. It was like, there it was. There it is. There's what it's all about. And that's going to happen. It's just that hard work, showing up every day, filling it out, thinking it through. And then I think one of the most important parts about this is don't rush it. Let it sit around and sit in your head and rumble around, kind of like a crock pot. Leave it. Let it just perk and simmer and do all that stuff. Go away from it, put it down, and let it sit there for as long as it needs to, so that you can come back to it with a fresh mind. And you're going to see the spices then are starting to really take off. And all of a sudden, it sort of just materializes. And you go, there it is. You got to get away from it before you can find it.
That's true. No, I think that is absolutely the case for us. We going through the process of documenting all these things, then letting it simmer for a while. Not obviously, you were the one that came up with the idea, and I didn't even try to come up with that idea because I already gone down that path before. But one of the things that I got most out of that simmering was realizing how that I guess documenting the truth within our business really, I guess, gave me that sense of peace. Like, okay, well, if we go through this process and it's all true and it's all authentic, then at least we'll come up with something that we don't have to make up. And hopefully it will grow legs of its own from there. And that most certainly did in our case.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope the brand Bewitchery book and this series is helping you craft spellbinding stories for your brand using the story cycle system. Theme music for our show is composed by Darius Holbert. It's beautifully edited by Caden Howell. And of course, handling all of our marketing for it is Marissa Hill. If I can help you and your team excel through the stories you tell, hit our contact page at businessofstory.com for information on in-person, virtual, and hybrid mastery courses, keynotes, and even do-it-yourself storytelling training. Please join us next week when we will travel through Chapter 7 called Journey, on how to increase customer engagement through the stories you tell. Until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Thanks so much for listening.